Good evening, and thank you for joining DeKalb Dems as we present the final in our series of candidate forums in this election cycle. I'm Steve Parker, co-chair of special events at DeKalb Dems. It is my honor to welcome you to be with us tonight as we hear from candidates in running for state reps in House districts 88 and 90. Our objective in producing these forums is to help you make an informed voting decision. This program is being recorded and is also being streamed live on Facebook and YouTube. Please be sure to like us on those platforms as well as on Twitter. This 8-part series of candidate forums is produced entirely by volunteers at DeKalb Dems. It's a true labor of love, and we take tremendous pride in putting them together for you. This helps us keep the costs down so that we can utilize more resources in our Get Out the Vote effort. Thank you in advance for your donation, whatever the amount. It is my pleasure now to introduce you to our Vice President and co-chair of special events at DeKalb Dems, Gloria Moore.
Hello, everyone. I want to join Steve in welcoming everyone here. I'm Gloria Moore, Vice Chair of DeKalb Dems, and also Steve's co-chair for special events. And as he said, we are pleased that we're being able to do these educational forums for our voters because, number one, we want you to go vote. And we want you to be an educated voter as well. So we want you to see the candidates. We would encourage you to take this as the first look or a second look, but do your due diligence and go to their websites and which we'll be putting in the chat, and take every opportunity to meet the candidates who are running for House District 88, if you don't already know them, and for House District 90. If John Jackson was here today, he would be bragging about the fact that DeKalb Dems is where Georgia wins, which is actually our new slogan, Georgia wins here. We are going to be introducing a new logo soon to back that up and to emphasize it. And so again, being able to educate our voters is a big deal, but we also take full bragging rights for our ground game. As Steve mentioned, Get Out the Vote is our thing. And we have the best person leading, actually the queen of Get Out the Vote, Karen Davenport. And so to do her job, however, she needs more than just volunteers, although she definitely needs volunteers. So if you would donate, it will make such a difference to how many canvassers we can get to do paid canvassing to support these fabulous candidates that we're offering you, and also to have literature and signs for you. So with that, I'm going to turn this program over to Brandy Weich, who will kick us off. We do have another moderator, Emily Leslie, who I think is, she may not be on yet. She's running a little late, but we will adjust accordingly. So Brandy, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can get to the important part of this program, our candidates.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gloria. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. I am just going to go over quickly some ground rules for all of our candidates for this forum this evening. The first ground rule is that each candidate will have 90 seconds to make opening statements. They will also have 90 seconds to answer each question that is being shared tonight, as well as 90 seconds to make closing statements. We will have 2 candidates for our HD 88 forum, and then we will have a number of candidates for our HD 90 forum, which will come right after that. So I am going to now hand it over to Emily Leslie to introduce our candidates for HD 88. Emily?
Good evening. Thank you so much, Brandy. And I apologize for being a little bit tardy. And as Brandy stated, I want to go ahead and welcome everyone again. And for our HD 88 forum. I wanted to allow the candidates the opportunity to we have I'm having a technical issue here.
Hey, Emily, I'm going to jump in here. It sounds like you're having some technical issues going on. So everyone, while Emily gets everything pulled together, I'm going to do a quick introduction. We do have two candidates for HD 88 this evening. The first is Representative Billy Mitchell. We will give him just a moment to introduce himself. And then our second candidate is Gabrielle Rogers. So I'm going to pass it over to Representative Billy Mitchell, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everyone here tonight. Representative, you actually are on mute.
How's that?
There you go.
Great. Emily, I do appreciate this opportunity to come before you at this time. The reality is my name is Billy Mitchell, and I've had the privilege of serving the citizens of the 88th Legislative District now for 20 years, having been examined by them over and over again and found to have served them well. So I do appreciate this opportunity. Just a little bit about my background. Prior to being elected to office, I was vice president of the Young Democrats in DeKalb County under the legendary Steve Henson. From there, I joined the Democratic Party, where I was the first vice president. I was also elected to the City Council of Stone Mountain, where my colleagues elected me as the vice mayor. From there, I joined the state legislature, and I've been there ever since the last 20 years, where I have served our community extremely well, if I must say so myself. I am the chair of the Democratic Caucus in the House of Representatives, elected by my colleagues. No legislation gets through the House of Representatives without my input, without leading our Democratic Caucus. I also have served as the co-chair of the Biden-Harris for President campaign in Georgia. I've also am the president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, which includes all the state legislators, the Black state legislators from around this country. And we do some other things. I'm on the executive board of the State Democratic Party as well. And as I said, I am so delighted to be with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Mitchell. And I'm now going to pass it over to Gabrielle Rogers to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Brandy, and thank you to the DeKalb Dems for hosting this vital forum. So I am your friend and your colleague, Gabrielle Rogers, and I'm running to serve you as the next state representative for House District 88. As a wife of a union worker, parent advocate, marketing and sales professional, and lifetime public servant, I am deeply concerned about the direction of our House District. And during this pandemic, many of our once thriving businesses in our district closed their doors due to the lack of small business protections. And this is particularly important to the families of those small business owners who lack housing, income, and other resources as a result. And this is in addition to the 20% of our neighbors who are living in poverty the last 10 years. And so I'm running to revitalize opportunity in our district. I'm the same friend who was in the trenches with you in 2020 and 2021, and you experienced the caliber of my leadership and the exhaustive commitment of my service as a precinct captain, post seat holder, and the immediate past president of the DeKalb Young Democrats. I am asking for your support in electing a candidate that's working for our community with quality leadership and proven results. And to learn even more about my plans for you at the Capitol, visit GabrielleForGeorgia.com, and that's on Facebook, Gabrielle for Georgia as well. I'm Gabrielle Rogers, and I'm running to serve as the next state representative for House District 88.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. I'm going to pass it back over to Emily Leslie to run through our forum questions. Just as a quick reminder to our candidates, we would like to keep the answers to 90 seconds for each of the questions that we are going through, just to make sure that we can stay on time for this evening. So, Emily?
Thank you so much. And again, sorry about that. And answer the question. So I'm going to go ahead and start with your first question. And just so we have a little bit of background for the questions to reference, the Georgia House of Representatives is also called the People's House. Along with the Georgia State Senate, it forms the legislative branch of the Georgia state government. The legislative branch works alongside the government to create laws, pass laws, establish the state budget, raise and lower taxes, and vote to uphold or override the governor's vetoes. The first question I want to give to Gabrielle, and it is this week, a draft Supreme Court majority opinion focused on overturning Roe v. Wade and taking reproductive rights away from women across the country was leaked. Republican-led state governments like Georgia have been preparing for this day by enacting trigger laws to restrict or outlaw abortion entirely if Roe is ever struck down. What can Democrats do to combat the Republican-led efforts restricting and or eliminating access to choice? And more importantly, what do you plan to do in the State House to protect women's right to choose and other constitutional rights for Georgia constituents? And if you want to take that first, Gabrielle.
Thank you so much for that question, Emily. It is a privilege to be a woman and to identify as a woman. And I believe in a woman's choice. Just like a man has autonomy over his body, women should also be permitted the same right. However, it's apparent that the Republican-led efforts are pro-birth. On any given day, over 400,000 of our children are living in foster care, and the numbers are increasing. The legislators should redefine what it means to be pro-life. It is not just about advocating for babies to be born, but implementing measures for children who are products of unwanted pregnancies to have a sustainable quality of life. As executive board member in several women-led organizations, I will build a bipartisan coalition of advocates across the state of Georgia to influence social change for women's rights. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. And Representative Mitchell, if you'd like to go ahead.
Certainly, this is election time. So, we have a lot of candidates who will tell you what they will aspire to do. And I'm grateful to be in a position to inspire you as to what I have done. Fact of the matter is, I have sponsored the Equal Rights Amendment in the state legislature, which is gaining traction all over this nation, and such that we have made a difference in every legislation that pertains to women in the House of Representatives. I've also, the speech that I gave on the House floor on this bill was the #1 viewed video on the New York Times website as we fought this bill. And as I said, as the chair of the Democratic caucus, I get to lead these efforts. Every single, those who know well, those you trust, trusting me, fact of the matter is every single woman countywide elected official in DeKalb County has endorsed my campaign, as is the National Organization of Women and Pro-Choice Georgia. These are folk who have examined what I said I would do, what I have done, and found me worthy of their support.
Thank you. The second question. Conservative think tanks such as the American Exchange Council and State Policy Network for decades have influenced state legislators. By such methods as sending model bills to Republican legislators who rubber stamp them with their votes, these bills do not represent the will of the people of Georgia. These conservative think tanks need to be addressed at both the national and state levels. What would you suggest that Democrats do to eliminate the extraordinary power of these think tanks that these think tanks have exerted over Georgia legislative process for the past several decades. And Ms. Rogers, will go to you.
Thank you, Emily. So each year, approximately 200 model bills become law, and it includes issues from opposing gun control, weakening our labor unions, and tightening voter identification rules. But the influence of these think tanks over the Republican legislator are more readily apparent when the Republicans are in the majority. So one way is to flip our Republican seats to Democratic majority. However, we must also hold our Democratic leadership accountable. And if we aren't pleased with the outcome, we should also elect quality leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. Representative Mitchell?
Certainly. Can you, for some reason, there you go. I'm so grateful for this question here, and I could not agree with the last speaker in that you ought to be careful as to who you should vote for. The reality is there would be about 4 Superior Court judges in this county that would not be there if it were not for my leadership. There would be hundreds of people whose homes would be foreclosed upon if I were not there. The Texas legislators absconded to DC to fight egregious voter registration bill, and I hosted them. I asked their chair to give me the bill to see, and I was amazed that the bills were identical. Subsequently, I found out that it was a result of groups like ALEC and others, the Heritage Foundation, that were going all over the nation spreading these kinds of legislative efforts. So I've started a PPRI, it's called the Public Policy Research Institute by the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, which we are in turn are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to come up with policies such that our members, not only in Georgia, but across this nation, will be able to handle that. The Crown Act, which prevents discrimination against hair, actually started in NBCSL, and it's in about 12 states, and it's going to be done in other states as well. So that's the kind of efforts that I have been doing right now.
Thank you so much. Number 3, legislator, what strategies would you implement to combat the Republican Party from passing laws that the majority of Georgians are against? Ms. Rogers, would you like to take this one?
Sure, I will. So thank you again, Emily. So according to our 2015 article in PLOS One, partisanship in American politics has increased exponentially over the past 60 years. And unfortunately, in Georgia's General Assembly, several leaders served for decades during the latter period of this trend as the divide continued to widen. Working across party lines does not begin in the legislature, and those relationships are cultivated in our communities and are transposed into our politics. And as an executive committee member in the DeKalb Chamber, the National Council of Negro Women, and a graduate of Leadership DeKalb, I have successfully worked on community initiatives and political advocacy projects with leaders of all political affiliations. Therefore, I will use my bipartisan coalition of elected officials, business leaders, and philanthropists across the state to influence my fellow legislators to begin compromising during the early stages of legislating, including drafting bills and co-sponsorship. Spending time understanding the concerns of our residents across the state and how they relate to our district are critical in gaining support for bipartisan legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mitchell.
Well, the reality is we have a representative government that is based on seniority. The longer you are there, the more power that you have to be able to accomplish things. As I've said often, freshman legislators aren't even allowed in the room to where the budget is discussed. There's only one legislator who's on the committee that designs the budget that has been there longer than me, and he's leaving to be an ambassador. That is where the budget is, in fact, created. So I I've had a great relationship with both sides because I have to work with them to be chair of our caucus. As I mentioned earlier, 5 of the 9 Superior Court judges are there because of my nominations, and they all were under Republican governors. I think it's about relationships. It's about being able to keep your word and be committed to what you do. And that wins the day at the final analysis.
Thank you so much for that. Debating is fundamental to the legislative and campaign process. Increasingly, Republicans are backing out of participating in campaign debates, indicating their lack of good faith, as well as their lack of preparedness for the job itself. How do you plan to engage with Republicans during the midterm election cycle?
Who's that question directed to?
Oh, Ms. Rogers, if you want to start us off with that one.
Okay, perfect. So this may be also a contributing factor to why DeKalb is majority Democrats. And we have a strong Democratic County Party, but our candidates and elected officials are approachable, and they encourage their constituents to hold them accountable. It's not a matter of fact of specifically engaging with Republicans, but informing, engaging, and getting the voters involved in the Democratic electoral process. And as the Democratic nominee, I will continue to host community and small business tours across the district, provide consistent communication through a newsletter and social media, and continue to educate the community about the importance of down ballot races.
Thank you. Representative Mitchell?
Could you repeat that question again? Because I got confused by the answer. Could you repeat that question again?
Sure. Debating is fundamental to the legislative and campaign process. Increasingly, Republicans are backing out of participating in campaign debates, indicating their lack of good faith, as well as their lack of preparedness for the job itself. How do you plan to engage with Republicans during the midterm election cycle?
Well, in the past, I have served as a surrogate for Jon Ossoff, as well as Raphael Warnock, going all over the state, representing them, being their voice when they could not be there to lend their voice at that occasion. I will continue to do so, knowing that I know the issues as well as anyone. I will continue to do that. Certainly, our governor-to-be, as I like to call Stacey Abrams, who, by the way, endorsed my candidacy. I will continue to do that as we go forward. And I might also add that the Vice President of the United States has endorsed my candidacy as Jon Ossoff because of the ability to be able to communicate across the state.
Thank you. How can the public of all party affiliations best get to know you? Ms. Rogers, if you want to take that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I am a candidate that's working for the community, but I am the only candidate in this race who has been reared in DeKalb County. My family was instrumental in the founding of St. Philip AME Church in Reynoldstown, which we now know as that beautiful facility on historic Keller Road. Our neighbors know me because I am present in our district. They frequent my website at GabrielleForGeorgia.com, and they receive my weekly newsletter, which you can also sign up on my website. They monitor real-time updates through my growing social media presence at Gabrielle for Georgia. And they also get to know me through my advocacy as a leader through local social justice organizations like the Stone Mountain Action Coalition. But the public is always more than welcome to email me at my email address at GabrielleForGeorgia.com.
Thank you. Representative Mitchell.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that there's a fondness for St. Philip AME Church, where I serve as an officer, as well as being endorsed by the pastor of that church, William Watley, and as well as the bishop of the AME Church, Bishop Jackson. I send out a e-newsletter to households in my district once a week. This has been going on for at least the last 12 years, Democrat and Republican for that matter. We certainly are in close communication with our district. And I would suggest to you that you can call me on my cell phone, as so many do, 404-630-2613. And you can see how responsive I will be.
Thank you. And finally, what are some of the ways you get to know your constituents and listen to their needs? And Representative Mitchell.
Great. And the reality is we are representatives and we represent the best interests of our constituents. I have been ranked in James Magazines as having one of the best constituent services office in all of politics. And that's a quote, that's not Billy Mitchell's opinion. You call me, you'll get a call back. You email me, you'll get an email back. You write me, you get a letter back, whether you're Democrat or Republican. I will continue to serve in such a way that will be how that I will get across the message that needs to be sent, as well as serving our constituents very well. Fact of the matter is, as I say all the time, you get the kind of leadership you deserve. The fact that we have the Republicans, they don't necessarily do these kinds of elections because they want their folks to be there long so that they can deliver to their community. I've gotten $500,000 this year to my community alone in the budget, which is untypical for a Democrat. I'm one of the few Democrats in all of the legislature that can get issues passed. When the governor wishes to discuss various issues, he calls me. So I pledge to continue that kind of leadership and being representative of the community that I serve since the last 20 years.
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and get from, if you want to go ahead and offer a closing statement, I'd like to give both of the opportunities to just leave us with a few words. Let us know how everyone can find you. And wait, I'm sorry.
Really quickly, Emily, really quickly, did Gabrielle get a chance to answer that last question? Okay,
no,
great.
Brandy, go. I'm sorry, Brandy. Ms. Rogers, go ahead. And with that question, I wanted to say, just let us know the ways that you have been reached. Same question, but how you have been reaching out to constituents in District 88.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. So I meet them where they are. We've been going door to door. We visited over 3,000 homes, which correlates to about 6,000 voters speaking with them. I've also hosted events in each sector of the district, met on one-on-one with our local business leaders, and organized listening sessions with our multicultural civic organizations that service our district. And then I took it grassroots. I called them on the phone and had awesome conversation with them. And lastly, as executive committee member of my local PTA, I get to engage with our educators, parents, and students as a community liaison. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for being here tonight. Representative Mitchell and Ms. Rogers, thank you so much for being here and thank you for running. And at this time, I would like to turn this over to Brandy White to continue and Ms. Gloria Moore to offer any other statements. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. Excuse me, Emily, I apologize for that. So we are now going to move into our candidate forum for HD 90. Just as a reminder, if our HD 90 candidates could come onto video, actually, hold that thought. Before we move into HD 90, would Gabrielle Rogers or Representative Billy Mitchell, candidates for HD 88, would you like to leave us with any closing comments?
Certainly. Given public service opportunity to speak, Who are you calling on first?
Go ahead, Representative Billy Mitchell.
Okay. Well, once again, I do appreciate this opportunity to get in front of you all and let you know that what I have been doing, what I will continue to do. The reality is, as I say often, you get the kind of representation that you deserve. If you want a leadership that can really accomplish some things, it can't be one of those kinds of issues where you're just changing people just because. The most revered legislator in the state legislator who co-chaired the Biden for president campaign with me, Calvin Smyre, he served in the legislature for 48 years. That's almost as old as I am. And the reality is he is revered. He can, in fact, go in and get things accomplished. And I hope to be able to fill that void when he comes. As a matter of fact, to give you all the scoop here, should I be reelected, it could be, and the Democrats take over, I could be speaker. I don't know if those who contemplate changing in leadership understand the power and the ability to be able to deliver to their constituents that such seniority holds. So I'm glad to be with you and look forward to representing you. And as I said, my phone number is 404-630-2613.
Well, thank you so much, Emily and Brandy. Oh,
Go ahead,
Okay.
Gabrielle.
okay. Thank you so much, Emily and Brandy and the DeKalb Dems for giving candidates an opportunity to share their platforms. Again, I'm Gabrielle Rogers, and I'm running to serve as the next state representative for House District 88. And as you just learned, I have the vision, commitment, and plan to usher in a new era of growth and sustainability. I'm asking you to join my coalition of over 350 donors and supporters to help revitalize opportunity in our community. And I am the candidate who is always working for our community. To learn more about how to volunteer for our campaign, please visit GabrielleForGeorgia.com. Again, I'm Gabrielle Rogers, candidate for State Representative for House District 88. Thank you again.
Great. And I just want to thank you both again for being here, both Gabrielle Rogers as well as Representative Billy Mitchell, for being here and being on our forum for House District 88. Thank you so much for taking out some time in your evening this evening to meet with our community. So I am now going to move over to the candidates for HD 90. So if you all could come onto video, that would be excellent. Just as a quick reminder of ground rules, so we have 90 seconds for all responses. So I will be opening up here in just a moment for introductions. So I ask you to keep that to 90 seconds, as well as when I go through the questions, if you could keep that to 90 seconds in your closing statements as well. Tonight, we do have 4 out of our 5 candidates that are up for HD 90. So looking forward to hearing from all of them. I am actually going to go ahead and open it up with our first candidate to introduce herself, Syra Draper.
Thank you, Brandy. So hello, my name is Syra Draper. I'm really grateful to the DeKalb Dems for giving us this opportunity. And with the few seconds that I have, what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about myself, but I also want to tell you about what sets me apart. So who am I? I am a civil rights attorney. I am a voting rights and elections expert. I am a mom of 3 small kids. I'm an immigrant. My mom is from Spain. My dad is from Pakistan. I served in the US Peace Corps. And I'm a person who stands up for what is right and who is not afraid to speak the truth. As far as what sets me apart, in this race, it's that I have an expertise that is critically needed at this moment. I know elections and voting rights. Until recently, I was the director of voter protection at the Democratic Party of Georgia. And in that role, I led voter protection efforts for the Biden, Warnock, and Ossoff campaigns. We partnered with county parties across the states, including DeKalb Dems, and over 12,000 volunteers to run programs that helped hundreds of thousands of voters make their voices heard. Programs like a voter assistance hotline, a poll watching program, and a ballot cure program. And those were some of the programs that you could see. We did a lot of work behind the scenes too. Most recently, my work led to the revelation that Georgia quietly eliminated its automatic voter registration program in January of 2021. And because that issue was exposed, automatic voter registration has now been restored. So look, there are so many things I care about as a Democrat, but voting rights is the key that is going to unlock the significant policy changes that we want to see. And for that, I'm your candidate.
Great. Thank you so much, Syra Draper. Our next candidate that I'd like to introduce himself is Peter Hubbard.
Hi, thank you very much for the opportunity. So Peter Hubbard, candidate for House District 90. I am first and foremost a clean energy advocate. So my career has been built around bringing more clean energy onto the grid. And I'm doing that through I hope, the legislative pathway, which is why I'm one of the key motivations for running for House District 90. Also through the regulatory approach. So every 3 years, we come up with a long-term plan to plan for our electricity. And I'm actively working on that front to also push on clean energy there. And then I hope to do that on the economic front. So that's really what I hope to bring to this office is the economic development that unlocks through clean energy. And I see a lot of different ways to harness that economic power, that political power, and that literal electrical power, and bring that back to the people. And so that's really what's motivated me to get into this race and what I hope to bring. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. Our next candidate, Bentley Hudgens.
Hey, Brandy, it's so good to see you virtually, and thank you everybody who has joined. Like Brandy said, my name is Bentley Hudgens. I am an Asian American union member, organizer for racial justice, and community builder that has been doing the hard work to provide for our communities when our leaders have failed for the past 10 years. I am, to be frank, I am tired of my friends dying. I'm tired of visiting friends who have been hate crimed in the ICU. I'm tired of hearing from workers across the state that their workplaces are not safe. They don't have enough money. They don't have enough time to spend with their families. I am tired of the status quo. I'm running for office because we deserve so much more. In college, I got my start as an advocate, came up to Atlanta, and have been working hard for our communities ever since. I think that we have an incredible opportunity to sustain the strong tradition in Georgia's 90th House District of strong progressive leadership that actually gets real solutions that benefit our communities in the present. I look forward to this conversation, and thank y'all for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Bentley. And lastly, we have candidate Michelle Schreiner.
Thanks, Brandy, and thanks everyone who's participating tonight. My name is Dr. Michelle Schreiner. I am a psychologist, happily married mom of twins who just turned 3 years old last month. And I've been serving as an advocate for years now at the Capitol, fighting for Georgians who work hard but struggle to make ends meet. And I do that because that's my background, that's where I come from. I know what it's like to go without, and when they say it takes a village, I can attest to that as well. And so that's why I've used my background, my skills and experience as a professor to educate students. And when you look at the state budget, 77% of our money, our taxpayer money, is used for education. And yet, where's the representation there? So if you would have me, I would be the only psychologist at the Capitol. We just passed a mental health care bill this year that had bipartisan support. And we've got a lot of work to do because we're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to providing mental health care in this state. So I bring a different perspective, one that is not new to advocating at the Capitol. And here's an opportunity now to have a bigger impact, if you will, if you'll have me. And so I look forward to our conversation tonight, and I will, Brandy, give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Just to let our viewers know, we do have one additional candidate for HD 90 who is not able to be here with us tonight. His name is Stuart Parnicott. So just want to let everyone know that there are 5 candidates who are running for state representative for House District 90. So I'm going to now move into our questions. So I will be starting with different candidates as we go throughout this. But just to give our viewers a quick overview for those that are here tonight, the Georgia House of Representatives, which is also called the People's House, along with the Georgia State Senate, forms the legislative branch of the Georgia state government. The legislative branch works alongside the governor to create laws, pass laws, establish the state budget, raise and lower taxes, and vote to uphold or override the governor's vetoes. So to get us started tonight with our first question, I'm going to read this to everyone, and then I will share who will be speaking first. So our first question says, this week, a draft Supreme Court majority opinion focused on overturning Roe v. Wade and taking reproductive rights away from women across the country was leaked. Republican-led governments like Georgia's have been preparing for this day by enacting trigger laws to restrict or outlaw abortion entirely if Roe is ever struck down. What can Democrats do to combat the Republican-led effort of restricting and or eliminating access to choice? And more importantly, what do you plan to do in the State House to protect women's right to choose and other constitutional rights for Georgia's constituents? So I'd like to open this up first to candidate Syra Draper.
Thank you, Brandy. So this is a deeply personal issue for me. I am a mother of 3. I have been pregnant. I have lost pregnancies. I've had to grapple with the extremely personal choice of whether to have an abortion. And things that I thought about when I was trying to make that choice was, could we afford another baby, especially with the kids that we already had? I thought about my career that I had worked so hard for, and would it be derailed again if we had another baby? I thought about my health and what would happen to my family if I had a difficult pregnancy, or if, God forbid, I died during childbirth. So I know from experience that there is no room for the government in those kinds of decisions, and I will fight like hell to support a woman's right to choose what happens to her family and what happens to her body. But at base, the problems are with Georgia's policy priorities, okay? The way that we change policy priorities is to elect leaders who share our values. So let's elect Stacey Abrams, who can then go veto bills that threaten a woman's right to choose. Let's elect more folks to the legislature who prioritize uplifting Georgia's working families and actually care about a baby once it's born, who believe in paid parental leave and who believe in subsidized daycare, okay? The way that we do this is all through voting rights. We need our votes to count so that leaders that reflect our values are in charge. And I'm uniquely qualified to push that piece forward.
Great, thank you, Syra. I'd like to now pass that question over to Bentley Hudgens.
Thank you so much. Look, let's lay this out very clearly. Bans on abortions only effectively ban them for working class women, trans men, and other people who have a uterus, specifically for our Black and brown neighbors who need abortions. We are looking, this situation in Georgia is even more dire because we have not expanded Medicaid. And even the hospitals who are still open, the first part of a hospital to close before they fully close is the neonatal centers and birthing wards. So we already are in a state with a crazy maternal mortality rate. And as a state rep, there are particular policies that we can get passed, right? Those are on the line, right? Medicaid expansion, Syra talked about a couple of them. But let's be real. We have had a very long time to codify Roe and to do the right thing. And I think that right now we need to make it very clear that abortion is still legal. As folks with, connections to better resources, we need to be giving them to people who provide abortions, like the Feminist Women's Health Center, like ARC Southeast, folks at I Need a Day, Aid Access, the National Network of Abortion Funds, and Keep Our Clinics. There are people who are already doing the hard work to make sure that we have reproductive health care for everybody who needs it. And right now, the best thing that we can do as leaders is make sure they have the resources to continue to do that very important and hard work. I am not going to say that I'm uniquely qualified. I'm already qualified. I've already been doing this work as an organizer to provide reproductive health care to people across the state, whether it was telehealth for PrEP or any other thing. So thank you all so much. And I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you, Bentley. I'd like to now pass it over to Michelle Schreiner.
Thank you, Brandy. Let's be clear. When you ask the question about Democrats, what can they do? The first thing we've got to do is elect Stacey Abrams. When Stacey is elected, she would never pass a ban on abortion. She would protect our reproductive freedom. So people have asked me, Michelle, does it matter if Stacey were elected? Absolutely, 100%. And it's not just reproductive freedom. I'll focus on that because that's the question tonight. But the reality is that she would protect our safety across the board. Now, with respect to me personally, reproductive freedom is deeply personal to me. I'm someone who struggled to get pregnant for many years. I needed 5 rounds of IVF to have my twins, and I've got 4 frozen embryos currently, trying to figure out what am I going to do with those things. And I will tell you this, it's no one's business in terms of what my decision is. And I don't think any politician has a place in the doctor's office when it comes to what I decide to do with my body. And that goes for any woman or pregnant person here in the state of Georgia. So I will be very outspoken out loud when it comes to fighting any extremist who dares, push these bans on our bodies. That's a no-go for me. Now, when you ask the other part of the question, and that is, well, what are you going to do as a representative? There's things that we can do. We can fight for things like having greater contraceptive services that are covered. Oh, gosh.
Thank you so much, Michelle. The time goes by quickly, I know.
It sure does.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Brandy.
for that answer. Yes, awesome. All right, we are going to dive into our second question.
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to respond.
I'm sorry. Who didn't get a chance to respond?
Peter, I can be very brief on that question.
Thank you, Peter. I sincerely apologize, Peter.
Oh,
yes,
no worries.
Please jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say very briefly that I feel very strongly that everyone has the right to determine their own future, how their life will be led, their economic future. So that self-determination is simply a non-negotiable point. So I will defend that. And obviously the best way to defend that is to elect folks who have promised to defend reproductive rights, and that's Stacey Abrams. But I also recognize that that may take some time to get there. So we have to work with the legislature that we have. So while I'll make every effort to elect those who support reproductive rights, I want to meet people where they are, and where I think that is in reducing unwanted pregnancies. That reduces the number of abortions that are out there, the need for abortions. And the way that we do that is by expanding Medicaid. So that's the way that I see to approach this issue and build some consensus is to, I know that it's a difficult issue, but there's an economic argument to expanding Medicaid, and then there's a reproductive rights argument that flows from that. And I think that's the common ground. And that's where we sort of push on.
Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate that answer. All right, diving into our second question, it says conservative think tanks such as the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, and State Policy Network for decades have influenced state legislators by such methods as sending model bills to Republican legislators who rubber stamp them with their votes. These bills do not represent the will of the people of Georgia. These conservative think tanks need to be addressed at both the national and state levels. What would you suggest that Democrats do to eliminate the extraordinary power these think tanks have exerted over Georgia's legislative process for the past several decades? And Peter, if you don't mind, I'd love to throw it back to you to go ahead and start us with this answer for question number 2.
Yeah, ALEC has been a subversive influence, I would say, for quite some time. So writing model legislation and then passing that around. And many times the legislators that are sponsoring these bills have not read these bills in the first place. So I think the way that I approach this is through accountability. That's one of my most motivating factors for wanting to run for office, is to hold those who are in power accountable. So as that preamble of that legislation, whereas the justification for that bill, I will hold them accountable for that in whatever form I can find, whether it's at the well, in the General Assembly, or in the public forum and in the court of public opinion. So that's the way to do it. I also, shining sunlight basically on those efforts and making sure that those bill sponsors know what they're actually sponsoring. The other way as well is to just get the dark money out of the system. That's a huge task, but I'll be a fighter to make sure that we also take some of this money that is just floating around to wash in politics and try and get that out of the picture as well.
Great, thank you. Michelle Schreiner.
Thank you, Brandy. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've got to have greater transparency, and that means doing what we can to expand open meeting laws so that people know who's attending, they know what the agenda is, what's discussed, and we can call people out for that too. So when you look at the state of Georgia, many of our Republican colleagues are members of ALEC. They do use those model legislative bills to pass them on as their own. So we've got to be clear when that happens, call them out for what it is, and use even campaign finance laws to follow the money. So use publicly available information to track it. And yes, there is dark money and that won't be captured there, but we've got to do whatever we can to speak out and showcase those issues, because they are influenced by money. There's no question by that. So that's the approach I would take, Brandy, when it comes to pushing back against these I can't talk anymore. These problematic influences in the Capitol.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Bentley Hudgens.
Hey, so let's not pretend that we need to do anything else. This is an Occam razor situation. The solution is very simple. We need to build power for the communities who need them most, because power concedes nothing without demand. The way that we take power away from the people who follow racist institutions like ALEC is to take power away from them. So we need to register and turn out every eligible Democratic voter in the state of Georgia and change the power dynamics of the legislature. And I will say this, I have already gotten laws passed at every single level of government. When I was in college, I defeated mega churches and super conservative right-wingers and got a law passed to protect LGBT employees from public employment discrimination down in Macon. The solution is very simple. We organize with our communities. We build power for the people who need them the most. And then as the next state representative of Georgia's 90th House District, what's going to happen is while I am in office, I will use that position of power to bring our communities into the legislative process and make sure that our communities have a say and a voice, not only on their job, but in democracy.
Thank you, Bentley Hudgens. Syra Draper.
Thank you. So think tanks do not represent the views of the people of Georgia. They don't even represent the views of mainstream Republicans. But the Republican legislature gets behind them because that's where the money is, that's where the power is. And frankly, people aren't paying attention. So if we really want to stop this from happening, what we need to do is elect a Democratic majority. They can't have a rubber stamp if they do not have the majority. But in the meantime, what we need to do is be loud. We need to bang that drum. We need to shout from the rooftops, excuse me. We need to do everything we can to shine a light on those terrible laws and demonstrate how they are hurting everyday people, not just Democrats, but Republicans too. The Republicans in the House won't care when Democrats disagree, but they will care when their own constituents and members of their own party disagree. So we need to win. We need to take the Democratic majority. But until then, we need to hold Republican lawmakers accountable to the public. And I'll also say this, there's a lesson here for us to learn, which is that unity matters. I love that our party is a big tent, and I love that we have diverse opinions and diverse views. But the Republicans have been able to pass key legislation because they put success over disagreements. So we need to find that correct balance. especially while we're the minority party. And we can't let perfection be the enemy of the good.
Great. Thank you, Sarah Draper. So as a follow-up, I have a similar question to that and would love to hear you all's thoughts and opinions. Our third question says, in the legislature, what strategies would you implement to combat the Republican Party from passing laws that the majority of Georgians are against? So I'd love to open it up with Michelle Schreiner.
Thank you, Brandy. Yeah, in my perspective here, I think that you either tug at their heartstrings and or their pocketbooks. And this is what I mean by that. So I'm a researcher by training, that's my profession. And so I use data to make informed decisions, to find those insights, to tell the stories about the lives that are impacted by people. And so whether that's in this district or whether that is finding the stories that are impacting those that live in Republican areas, it's showcasing those stories and letting people understand how their lives have been affected. And if that's not compelling, if putting people first is not compelling in this legislature, then hitting them where the pocketbook is ought to be another way to get them to pay attention. And that is building partnerships with businesses that can add pressure to these lawmakers and say, look, this is just not good business to pass these harmful bills. You are going to have an economic repercussion if this goes through. And so to me, if you can't pull on their heartstrings, then certainly hitting that pocketbook, I think, is an opportunity to have some movement here to fight back against that harmful legislation. And we've done it before. I think those are tools that we've got to continue using again, because we are in the minority. And so we've got to be creative in the defensive mechanisms that we have available.
Great. Thank you, Michelle Schreiner. Peter Hubbard.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, how to prevent Republicans from passing legislation that is non-majoritarian, that is not in the interests of Georgians. I think really the answer there from me, my perspective, is to take the case to their constituents, to their people, whether that's all of Georgia or their specific district. And the reason being is that, I think too often people underestimate voters and think that maybe they won't understand the implications of what this legislation that's being proposed is. But I don't make that assumption. I make the assumption that you're a smart individual and you will understand the ramifications. And so I think just making those, the implications of that legislation, what that impact would be, and is this really in your interest, in the interest of all of Georgia, making that case from whatever forum it happens to be, the bully pulpit, the stump, social media. I want to hold our legislators accountable, starting with myself, but with those that are putting forward legislation that is not in the interest of Georgians.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter Hubbard. Sarah Draper.
So I would make it easier to elect more Democrats. I think we need to be approaching everything in the legislature on two tracks. One, we need to fight for today. We have to eke out every win we can eke out for our community. We have to be rapid and responsive and nimble when it comes to the assault on our rights. And we have to push back loudly and aggressively on the things that really matter. But here's the reality to that approach. While Republicans are in the majority, success for us is going to look like incremental progress, or it could even look like reducing the amount of harm that a bill is capable of doing. So the second track that we need to be working on is how to change the face of power in Georgia. I'm talking about long-term change, infrastructural change. When we all vote, when we elect leaders who represent our values at every level of government, we will be in the position to make the kind of substantial changes that we want to see. Georgia's a blue state. Look at who is moving to our state. It is people of color. It is young people. It is people moving to our cities. And every year we are becoming increasingly blue. So we need to empower these folks to vote. That means eliminating barriers and fighting voter suppression, so that we can have a government that finally represents the people.
Great. Thank you, Sarah Draper. Bentley Hudgens.
Hey, so To be frank, I have taken Republicans to bat several times and win several times and have won several times. When I was at the New Georgia Project as a political strategist, I co-authored a demand letter that was sent to Brad Raffensperger's office and Brian Kemp's desk that resulted in drop boxes being installed across the state. In addition, in the 2020 legislative session, I led a coalition of people who want better for our communities to restore the proposed cuts to the public defender's office. I took then subcommittee chairman Andy Welch aside and spoke to shared values of believing that people should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. So public defenders are a crucial part and critical part of the legal process. In addition, when it was time to shut down the session, I organized with folks at Black Voters Matter at Fair Fight and alongside of the Progressive Coalition of organizers in Georgia to shut down the legislative session because they were trying to use the pandemic as an opportunity to cut the public out of the legislative process. We can say all the time, yes, we do need to vote in every single election. We absolutely do. But in addition, there are internal legislative strategies. For example, this past year, I called out the funding disparities around voting in Georgia. There are ways that we can gum up these bad bills and beat them by building power alongside of our communities and working to eliminate those who are in positions of power and seek to harm us.
Thank you so much, Bentley Hudgens. Okay, we're about halfway through. So our fourth question for our candidates here is debating is fundamental to the legislative and campaign processes. Increasingly, Republicans are backing out of participating in campaign debates, indicating their lack of good faith, as well as their lack of preparedness for the job itself. How do you plan to engage with Republicans during the midterm election cycle? And I am going to pass that back over to Bentley Hudgens.
Thanks, Brandy. I want to be honest with y'all. I have no intention of talking to Republicans during this election cycle. I do not seek to prioritize the valuable time that we have to talk, and so instead of talking to voters who share our values, to talk to people who seek to undermine our communities and destroy the wealth that people of color are building for themselves and their families, for LGBT people, for immigrants, for disabled people. I am seeking to build power for the people who need it the most. And so I'm not spending precious time during this midterm cycle talking to Republicans.
Great, thank you, Bentley. Michelle Schreiner.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, I may have a different perspective there. I do think that it is important to be able to work with people across the aisle. And yes, there is a time for debate. I also think there's a time for dialogue and for meeting people where they're at. There are actually instances where political affiliation really shouldn't matter. And I've heard from our neighbors talking about issues pertaining to public safety. When you need to call 911, and here in DeKalb County, when we call 911, we get routed to DeKalb County, then City of Atlanta. Turns out the same thing happens near the border in Clayton County. And so there is a technical fix for that. Turns out there is also a Republican who has the same issue. So why not work with someone to get the job done? Because we are in the minority, why not have a Republican sponsor the bill and bring that forward? If the impact is there, if we are safer for it, then why say no to that? So I am looking for opportunities to work with others, whether they are Republicans or Democrats. I know how to find common ground as a psychologist in doing so and not losing myself in the process. So I'm open to getting work done across the aisle. I think you've got to be able to do that, as well as working with our partners.
Thank you, Michelle Schreiner. Peter Hubbard, I'd like to pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. It's an excellent and fun question. We have to, again, I mentioned accountability, and so having discourse and debate is fundamental to a democracy. So to not engage in that is as you have said, bad faith. But it's also because, frankly, I enjoy engaging in debates of this sort with folks of all stripes, because often, they're very good ideas, but it's usually end up on top frankly, because I have the people's interests at heart in the sort of positions and policies that I'm trying to put forward. So it can be a challenge, I understand, to work with folks, but I think the way to do it is to start with a listening ear. Everyone has kind of an issue or maybe a few that are very, very important to them. And maybe the prescription for how to solve that is different. But I think it's important to listen to folks and empathize with them, and then try and work to find some sort of common ground, or at least areas where you can kind of think together and work towards solutions. But I always want to keep the door open to finding that one champion in the Republicans who also is very motivated by that issue that you're trying to put forward, or can see that perspective, and then they can help bring more folks along. So I'm always willing to work with folks, but I will hold you accountable if your positions just don't support, aren't in the best interests of Georgians and those of House District 90.
Thank you, Peter Hubbard. Syra Draper.
Yeah, so I mean, Republicans not wanting to debate us, I don't think it only indicates a lack of good faith. I think it indicates they're scared. They can't debate us on the issues. I mean, that's just what it is. But I also agree, look, when it comes to finding solutions for Georgians, I'll talk to anybody. And when I was DPG voter protection, I worked closely with folks at Raffensperger's office when it meant that I could improve voting rights for Georgians. And when it didn't, I didn't work with them. But I think, having that door open and having that opportunity, being there to pounce when it arises is super important. With respect to the time period right now, the midterm elections, look, I mean, HD 90 is a very Democratic district. That means that whichever one of us wins the primary is likely going to win the seat in November. So win or lose, my sights going beyond this race after this primary. So after this primary, what am I going to do? My day job is with an organization called Power the Vote, which is a nonprofit that I founded to fund year-round voter protection programs in battleground states. I'm going to continue to do that work because that sets us up for success, not only in 2022, but in 2024. And I think that taking a long-term view of voter protection is really important. But I'm also going to focus on key races in Georgia for the midterms. Electing Stacey Abrams would be a game changer for so many reasons, but for the legislature in particular, because in order for a Republican majority to avoid a veto, they'll have to compromise and work closer to the middle. So I'm going to do everything I can to help her campaign. And I'm also going to support our Democratic nominees in close and flippable state house and Senate districts. Down ballot matters. It's essential for getting us that Democratic majority that I keep mentioning. And, so that means I'm going to be knocking on doors and making phone calls and curing ballots and anything else to make sure that our candidates are supported and make their way to victory. And I hope you'll do that with me.
Thank you so much, Syra Draper. Okay, our next question. What are some of the ways you get to know your constituents and listen to their needs? I'd like to open that up with Michelle Schreiner.
Thank you, Brandy. My favorite way of doing so is meeting people right where they're at, which is home, typically. I think having a personal connection is really the most powerful connection, knowing the vibe from the person, knowing their story, and knowing how to stay in contact with people. So I never want things to be one and done. That's why I put my phone number on all my campaign materials, because I want to be accessible. I am responsive. I just need to know that you're knocking on my door or calling me. And so to me, communication has to be a two-way street. And if by close, if we can put our contact information in the chat, I'll gladly do so. Meet and greets. That's another great way of connecting with people. Going to neighborhood meetings, showing up where the people are. That's what really this is about. Again, my focus really is about people and putting them first. And so I want to meet you where you're at. I want to stay in touch with you. I want to know what your questions are, what your concerns are, and any feedback that you have for me. So that's what I'm about. Thanks, Brandy.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle Schreiner. Peter Hubbard.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. How to meet, people where they are, the constituents, and make sure that their voices are being heard. That's extremely important. I think the main way that I've been doing that is by going door to door. And it's been great fun to meet all of the folks that are out here in House District 90. I also put my phone number on my materials, and it's been a delight to receive phone calls from people who've received my pamphlets and have a chat and conversation with about them about that. But I'm also really interested in making myself available. Of course, is very important. But I'm interested in also finding those people who don't know whom to turn to, or maybe aren't as bold about coming out to meet and greets and things like that. So I'm also interested in finding those people that are a little bit quieter and a little bit less engaged, and finding out what's important to them, so that I'm making sure I'm representing them as well as all those who are more active in politics and being out in the public. So I'm interested in representing everyone.
Great. Thank you very much. Bentley Hudgens.
Hey, so look, again, there are basics here, right? My campaign has canvassed 15,000 doors, made 20,000 phone calls, sent 35,000 text messages, opened up just about every floodgate on digital that we can, so that we can talk to people. Because as a representative, your job is to represent the people. But I do want to talk about something else. As an artist, as a performer, I think it's really important that we engage in cultural organizing. As my friend Nsé Ufot says, culture beats politics and policy every single time. And last night I was in East Atlanta with Commissioner Mariah Parker, who endorsed my campaign, and their Atlanta album release. They use the form of rap to talk about the issues that really impact our communities. And so not only do I do the basics of talking to our neighbors, I also spend a lot of time in cultural organizing and making sure that I meet people not only where they are in their homes, but the spaces where they express their truest forms. And I think it's really important that we build community alongside of one another and have long-lasting relationships that aren't based off of extractive forms of communication, but as a true form of building power together, and having not just my door being open, but them being able to call me anytime I need anything, whether it's a cup of sugar or to go, beat Republicans at the State House.
Thank you so much, Bentley Hudgens. Syra Draper.
Okay, so stay with me on this one for a second. I think the best time for you to get to know me is when I am not campaigning for your vote. So that's why I like to talk about my career in service before I ran for office. Because when I say I am running for office to serve our community, it is not just a talking point for me. It is a lived value. I am not asking you to trust me first and then I will deliver for you. I think the stakes are way too high for that. So I have worked in service to others my entire career. I have a history for fighting for the disenfranchised and the underrepresented and delivering real, tangible results. For the last 3 years, I threw everything I had to help folks vote and to make their voices heard. And I know that many of you on this call know that because you were in the trenches with me. We were all in it together. And before that, I was a civil rights lawyer at the Southern Poverty Law Center, where I represented children torn apart from their parents under the Trump administration's cruel family separation policies. My first gig out of college was joining the Peace Corps, which was an experience that shaped my entire worldview. So if you want to know about the kind of person that I am, look at my track record before I ran for office. And just know that if I'm elected, I'm going to continue to serve our community in the way that I always have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Syra. I believe that is all the questions that we have for this evening. I don't see any that have been posted into the chat. So I just want to take a moment to thank our candidates for being here this evening. This was really excellent, and I am going to open it up for closing statements. Just to be fair to all of the candidates, we are going to do this in the opposite order of where you had opening statements. So we are going to begin with Michelle Schreiner.
Thanks, Brandy. And again, thank you all for participating tonight, for listening, and I hope learning a little bit more about each of us. I am running a campaign that's focused on putting people first. And that's because people feel like they've been left behind. And I know from experience that when you have that village, when you have that strong community and good government programs, the opposite can be true. You can actually be lifted up. And that's what happened to me many years ago. But when I see what's going on now, things feel harder. It feels more difficult to have a chance. And that's what people are asking for, a chance for a better education, a chance for a better job. And when you have those things, then you can take care of your own. And right now we are fighting for the basics. We're fighting for schools, better schools. We're fighting for better roads and infrastructure. We're fighting for grocery stores and dine-in restaurants, for crying out loud. So these are just some of the core issues that I've heard as I've knocked doors across the district here, meeting our neighbors where they're at. And so that's what I'm about. I would be the only psychologist at the Capitol fighting for education, fighting for our reproductive freedom, fighting for all these issues that are decided upon each year, every year at the state legislature. And I'm not new to this. I've been serving as an advocate for years, fighting for things like the Georgia Work Credit to give people a chance to improve their lives. And that's what I'm about. So I would ask for your support. Please consider me for the May 24th election date. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle Schreiner. Bentley Hudgens.
This was such an amazing forum. I really appreciate all the work that y'all did to put this on. Look, the lines have never been more clear. There is a reason why the leading voting rights organizations like Fair Fight and the Committee for a New Georgia have endorsed my campaign. The civil and human rights community, along with the unions, is lining up behind my historic team. Their support is humbling. We are building a coalition to change every person's life in this community for the better. Whether it is fighting for our voice on the job, our voice in democracy, or our voice in the doctor's office to have somebody who actually listens to us. When I was 19, I was able to get healthcare that made me able to hear. I was deaf for nearly 2 decades. I understand what it means when policy is bad and that we have leaders who fail to do their jobs. I want to have your back. I want to make our lives better, not only, just in the interim, but in the real and the tangible and in the future and in the present. I want to thank everybody for coming. I absolutely love all of you and the work that you do. Please give me a call, 404-260-7430. Send me an email, bentley@bentley4georgia.com. Find me everywhere on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Bentley4Georgia. Y'all are great. I look forward to a continued conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bentley Hudgens. Peter Hubbard.
Thank you once again for this forum, and I'm just delighted to be able to share the stage with so many awesome people. I'm in this race for a lot of different reasons, but I have an 8-month-old and I also have a 6-year-old, and I want to leave them a better planet. I'm extremely motivated by climate action, and I want to bring the expertise that I've developed in energy, because I know that bringing that clean energy to Georgia has so many other implications on public health, on transportation, on conserving our environment and leaving a better world for those who will follow us. So I want to bring that expertise. I consider myself a smart guy. I like to look at numbers. I can dive into the details and bring that policy know-how wherever I can find it. If it's a good idea, I want to hear it. I want to put it forward. So that's what I'm looking to do. And I hope that I can earn your vote and take that expertise to the State House and push for the reforms, the systemic reforms that we really need to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter Hubbard. And lastly, Syra Draper.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you so much for the opportunity tonight, everyone. I really enjoyed myself here. I'll be ready to serve you in the legislature on day one. In my work in voter protection, I worked in 159 counties, and some of those counties were blue, many more were red. That didn't matter. We still got the job done, even when we had to work with folks whose political beliefs didn't entirely align with ours. And our approach had to change depending on where we were, but at the end of the day, it was all about the results. And that's a critical skill set, because very similarly at the Capitol, I'll be working with folks representing 159 counties, some of whom are blue, but most of whom are red. And for the sake of us, we still need to find a way to deliver results. So that's I have experience in that, and I'm ready to go. The other point that I'll make is that I've been working with other Democratic legislators for years now. I have drafted legislation for them. I have provided policy analysis. When they want to know how an election bill is going to impact voters on the ground, I am the person they speak to. So I am proud to have the endorsement of many of our elected officials, including but not limited to District Attorney Sherry Boston, DeKalb Commissioner Steve Bradshaw, Senator Elena Parent, Chairwoman Mary Margaret Oliver, Democratic Whip David Wilkerson, and former Atlanta City Council member Natalie Archibong. I would be honored to earn your vote and continue my service to the people of Georgia. You can find more information at my website, www.votesyra.com. And I also have a poll locator tool where you can find the closest early voting and election day location to you, as well as directions and all the details that you'll need to get you to vote. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Syra Draper. And thank you so much to all of our candidates here tonight, both on HD 88 as well as HD 90. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight. I'm going to pass it over to Steve Parker and Gloria Moore to close us out.
Thank you very much. Those of you who have been with us all day, I hope you've been inspired, because this has been one of the best group of forums that we've had. We intended for them to be educational. That's what we want to do for our voters in DeKalb County. And we want to spotlight and showcase these fantastic Democrats that we're offering for election. And it's in some cases such a shame that we can't, elect them all, at least not all at one time. We encourage you to use this as a first look or one of your looks at the candidates. Please take a look at their websites. If you haven't put your website in the chat, please do. And we encourage you to reach out to them and ask questions. Every single candidate has given you a phone number or an email, and it is to your benefit to ask them directly the questions that we didn't get to this afternoon. I would like for all of the folks who have been involved in planning this event. I see Steve is on. We have some support volunteers that have been running our Zooms for the last 6 or 7 forums, Paula and Jesse. And we have our moderators, Brandy, and if Emily's still on, Mike Lynch, Ucha, all of you. I want to take this opportunity to thank you and all of the folks who have gone before this team. They tell you never say never. We think, Steve, that this is our last forum in this primary cycle, but you just never know what might come up, and we might need to come back and do some more. But right now, we want to thank our audience for being with us. And I do want to point out that Facebook, all of these forums have been broadcast on Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube, so that you can go back and look at them. We encourage our candidates to definitely share the ones on Facebook Live and Twitter and on YouTube with your networks. You gave us some great answers, and they need to see, what you've had to say. So Steve, any last words you want to give tonight?
Yeah, I have so much enjoyed learning all this information over 7 candidate forums. I've gotten to understand the way these candidates feel about certain issues that are really important to me. It's helping me make a decision, very important decision. I wish everybody luck on May 24th. And again, as Gloria said, these things just don't happen. We've done 7 of these forums, and we could not do it without dozens of people on our team, of moderators, question writers, technical support, and others. So thank you all so much. And if there's another forum coming, you'll be the first to hear about it. So thank you all, and good night.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Good evening. Enjoy Mother's Day weekend.
Bye-bye.